Hey guys, Frosty Knives here, back from an unexplainable hiatus and back with another book review. And today we are going to be reviewing a book that most nobody has asked for. And today we are going to be reviewing Stephen King's Firestarter. Now, Firestarter came out in, hold on a minute here, 1980. And my copy of the paperback clocks in at just over 400 pages, 401 pages. And Firestarter is the story of Andrew and Charlie McGee, and one of Stephen King's better creations, I think, as they're being chased by the Shop, the shadowy government agency known as the Shop. And so basically, the story goes that Andy McGee and Vicki Tomlinson, which turned out to be Charlie's parents, in college for $200 decide to enroll in an experiment. And in the government experiment, there are 12 people who are injected with a chemical compound known as Lot 6. And what they are trying to do is they're trying to induce powers. Think of the super soldier serum. They're trying to induce powers and see what happens to these people when they're injected with this compound. Of the 12, 9 died. One of them went into hiding, and Andy and Vicki wound up getting married and having a child. Vicki and Andy did wind up receiving some powers. Vicki's powers were very rudimentary. She didn't get a lot. She could do a little bit. She was slightly telekinetic. Andy had what they called mental dominance, which what he would call was the push. But what was really important was what their daughter Charlie got, Charlene McGee. And she got most of what her parents had, but she also had the ability, she was pyrokinetic. She could start fires, and not just start fires, and not just little fires, but she could start blazes. And in the 2 instances in the book where she uses her powers, she's able to do some pretty extraordinary things with her powers. She's able to blow up cars, melt bullets, set giant things on fire. Temperatures up to 4,000, 5,000 degrees. Her pyrokinetic ability is probably somewhere along the line of like the Human Torch. And the Shop wants them. Specifically, the Shop wants her to study her, to use her as a weapon. And that's predominantly the book. The book is Andy and Charlie on the run from the Shop. And their battle with the Shop. And once again, Stephen King sort of doesn't go into the realm of the supernatural like he's used to. But we're back into the realm of like the dead zone, where we're talking about ordinary human beings who have powers, much like Johnny Smith was a psychic and how he dealt with these abilities and his powers. Now we have Charlie McGee, who is a fire starter, a pyrokinetic, and Andy, and how they deal with their powers and the government wanting them. So we're back into thriller territory. We're back into sort of like the thriller category. And I have to say that I enjoy Firestarter more than I enjoyed The Dead Zone. I mean, very similar stories. People with powers, ordinary people with powers, how they deal with it. But where I found The Dead Zone to be boring and more clinical and just a lot of jargon, Firestarter really centered around the relationship between Andy and Charlie. And specifically Charlie. And here you have this 8-year-old girl who has these powers that she didn't ask for. Her parents were involved in an experiment in college, and then she has these abilities that she doesn't know what to do with, that she thinks makes her a monster, that she can use to kill people, and she doesn't know what to do with them, or how to deal with it. And then you have the shadowy government agency after her, wanting her to run further experiments on and to see if they can weaponize her and to see if they can duplicate the process and make more of her. So the story really focuses on Andy and Charlie and Andy's desire to protect his daughter from the government and to just see if they can just go somewhere and live a normal life and just be normal people and just try to contain their abilities. Andy McGee, much like Johnny Smith, suffers from sort of a detriment. Every time he uses his mental dominance ability, what he calls the push, if he pushes too hard, too often, and too much, he gets pinprick hemorrhages in his brain, much like Johnny Smith did. Johnny Smith, using his psychic abilities, was affecting his brain, and it was giving him hemorrhages, which eventually was going to kill him. Same with Andy McGee. Every time he uses the push, and the harder that he uses it, the more that he uses it, he gets pinprick hemorrhages in the brain, and eventually it will kill him. The difference is, with Charlie, she doesn't have that problem. She can use her abilities with no detrimental side effects. So that makes her super important. Because it's not, unlike Andy and unlike Johnny, her powers isn't going to kill her. It's not going to kill her to use them as much as she wants. Maybe that's because of the combination, and she was born that way, and she's young versus someone who's into adulthood and older when they get it. But whatever the case may be, she has all of the benefits and none of the downfalls. I'd really like the relationship between Andy and Charlie, because it's a father who's doing what he can, what he needs to do to try to save his daughter. And I do like the shop, and we really get to see, this is where, if you want to read subtextually, this is kind of where we really get to see Stephen King's distrust of the government. Here you have the shop, who's this shadowy government agency that's working behind the scenes, that has their filthy little hands and all kinds of experiments and pots and weapons and stuff, and now here they are chasing down a little girl, murdering whoever gets in their way so they can take her, and they could weaponize her, they could experiment on her and do all kinds of shadowy government things. And so really, I think subtextually speaks about Stephen King's distrust of the government, specifically, and how he feels that there's these shadowy bits of the government, there's this conspiracy stuff going on under the scenes, working to subvert people and to subvert society. Really interesting. I liked the shop. I like the concept of the shop, and the shop doesn't really show up anymore. This is the book where it is mainly focused on the shop. To my knowledge, the shop shows up in a couple of other places, very small. I think the shop shows up in Dreamcatcher. And I think the shop is behind, if you've ever seen the miniseries The Golden Years, where the older gentleman was aging, was getting younger. I think the shop was behind that. It's been many years since I've seen Golden Years. But after Firestarter, we really don't see the shop anymore. And I kind of missed that, because I really liked the shop. I like these conspiracy, government, shadowy figures, shadowy organizations that are working behind the scenes, which is why I think I really like Randall Flagg, because he's like a one-man shop. He's shadowy and working behind the scenes and whatnot. The story, the characters in the story, once again, are really good. The members of the shop are, and then they're not just evil per se. They're not just shadowy agents per se. Some of them are, but like the leader of the shop, Captain Hollister, he's not just cut and dry black and white evil. He has some nuance to him. What he's doing right? Should they really be chasing this little girl? Is this something that he should be involved in? They do send out a special agent called John Rainbird, who's a really interesting character. He's really fascinated with death, and he's a Native American who was a Vietnam War veteran, and he's really fascinated with death. He's a cold-blooded killer. He's very good at his job. He's sort of a hitman. He goes out and does the jobs that other people can't do, takes out the people that other people can't do. And he's fascinated with death. Specifically, he's fascinated with what happens to you when you die. And so he's going after people, and he's torturing and he's killing, And then he's looking at them to try to see what happens at the moment that their life extinguishes. And in a way, he's trying to figure out his own death. What happens when you die? And then he really becomes fascinated with Charlie, this little girl, and he really starts to think that she's the key to him unraveling the mysteries of death. That is, if he murders her, he'll figure out what happens and all the mysteries of death, and it will answer everything. And he becomes really fascinated with her. And the book mentions that he sort of starts to fall in love with Charlie. I don't think in a sexual way, in a way that's creepy, but just like in a very fatherly figure way, albeit a very demented way, because his ultimate plan is to kill Charlie, a young person. He's never killed, I don't know if he's ever killed a child before, and to see if he can figure out the meaning of death and then to kill himself. So Rainbird is an interesting character, sort of very twisted. His motivations are extremely he's very selfish, very self-motivated. He wants to kill people, and he wants to figure out death, and he wants to do that. Only 2 instances in the book do we actually get to see Charlie use her powers. Once in the middle of the book, and once at the end when they're making their escape from the shop. And I really wish you would see more of it, but what we do see is terrifying and is ferocious, and her ability to just send out and make fires, to explode vehicles, melt bullets, explode buildings, to melt steel, to create fires of 4,000 degrees and above. This ability of hers to incinerate people. I mean, it's terrifying. Seeing it come out of an 8-year-old child. At one point, the doctor that oversaw the experiment, Dr. Wainless, is talking to Captain Hollister of the shop, and he says, "You don't know what you have on your hands here. You're talking about a child with unlimited potential, because we don't know what her potential is." And he makes this comment about what if this child's powers just grows exponentially? What if you basically have a walking nuclear bomb? What if she has the ability to crack the planet? And it sounds fantastical, but when you see what Charlie can do, and it's only just a little bit of what Charlie can do, even though she's destroying everything in her path, it's just a fraction of what she can do. The thought of what she could become is potentially terrifying. And there is, I guess, the horror, in the book. Is it, that the government is after this little girl that they've essentially created, that they want to weaponize, they want to make more of, they want to reinstitute the Lot 6 program? Or is it just this potential that Charlie has? The ability to crack a planet. The ability to become a walking nuclear bomb. The ability to just destroy everything. Nothing really is going to get in her way. So I found Firestarter very fascinating. And I found it to be a good read. I found it to be a better read than Cujo and a better read than The Dead Zone. I really enjoyed it. I liked the dynamic between Andy and Charlie. I understand this drive and this desire of a father to just try to save his child at all costs, get her somewhere safe, blow the whistle on the shop, try to live a normal life, as normal as you can, just be a child, and what you would do to save your child. And then the motivations of the shop, they've created this thing and now they want it. They think it's property. They want to make more. They want to replicate it. They want to study it. It's always with the government and with these shadowy organizations, right? They make something. They don't think ahead. They just think only one step, they don't think the future. They just think 1 or 2 steps ahead. Can we do it? And then can we make more? And how can we weaponize it? And how can we turn this into something that we can use on our enemies? Very, very common themes in these shadowy government conspiracy, stories. The character of John Rainbird was fascinating. I would have liked to have seen the shop show up in other stories. I like to have maybe have seen a sequel or something, or another story about the shop, or because the shop isn't gone. I mean, their Virginia outpost, their Virginia center was destroyed, but it's very well mentioned in the book that they're nationwide. They have other bases. There's one in Hawaii. There's other bases around the states, and they may even be multinational. They may have bases in other countries. So the shop is not, gone. But they never really talk about it again. And I would have liked to have seen more in other books and other stories. Maybe we'll get a shop story in Castle Rock. Maybe Castle Rock will, the miniseries that was coming out, that's out now, will revive the shop. That would be nice. Maybe Stephen King will visit the shop again in another book. So overall, this is really good. A really good story. It's a really good read. A really not a lot of slowdown. Even though they're on the run, there's not a lot of what I would consider boring parts. And even though it's limited to what you can see her fire abilities, she uses it. What you do see is really good and really amazing. So I would give this. What did I give it on Goodreads? I can't remember if I give it a 4 or a 5, but I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. And I would definitely say that you should read this because this is really good. Much better as far as that type of story where you've got just ordinary people with powers. Much better than the Dead Zone, I would think. So there's my review of Stephen King's Firestarter. Look at how ratty this book is. I think I got it at a used bookshop. Somebody named Roger Lewis owned it previously. It's a little ratty, little chewed up and whatnot, but well loved. So 4 out of 5 for Firestarter. It's a good read. I would highly recommend reading it. One of his better books that doesn't deal with the supernatural. One of his better earlier books where he wasn't dealing with the supernatural, where he was just dealing with people who had powers or special abilities. And how that worked. Loads better, I believe, than the Dead Zone. So I would definitely give this a read. That's my review of Firestarter. Hope you enjoyed it. Tell your friends, tell your enemies, share it, subscribe it. And I'll make a joke here about seeing you in another 2 months or so. I don't really have a schedule. I just kind of do these on a whim. And when the fancy hits me, I guess that's the best way to put it. So, thank you for watching, and I will see you at some point.